It's going live now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Greetings. Hello. Happy day to you. We hope that you are doing well. Hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual awareness and strength. And we're glad that you are joining us today for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And today, our topic is violence on the continent and the issue at hand, specifically focused on trafficking, which is a significant issue on the continent. There are all types of people that get trafficked, but particularly as it relates to young women and girls, it is a very tragic affair indeed. So, we're going to hear about the current reality on the ground on the continent today. And we're glad that you're here to join us for this. We give honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Here in this hemisphere, it's November, which means in most of these territories, whether it's Turtle Island here or the United Snakes of America, or as we used to call, as we always call, rather, Canada, Clanada. November is commemorated for Thanksgiving. And so we always think of the indigenous people in their righteous struggle for justice. So we honor them and we honor our African ancestors. And we do that all the time. And we rely on their energy and their direction to guide us every day of our lives. So we're thankful that they have entrusted us with the legacy of carrying on this tradition of culture and human existence to the highest level that we're absolutely possible of achieving. So we go to our introductions just to let you know who we are. And to facilitate that for those that may not know, our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary independent mass pan-African political party based in Africa. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a non-governmental agency. We are an independent revolutionary political party. And by independent, we mean we are only behooving to the masses of African people, no one else. And that's what we are. And our objective is Pan Africanism, which we define as one united socialist Africa. That is what we want. Pan Africanism for us is not an ideology, it's an objective. We have an ideology. Our ideology is Nkrumahism, Touréism, Cabralism, from the works of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and Amilcar Cabral. But our objective that our ideology is designed to guide us in achieving is Pan-Africanism. And we define that objective as one united socialist Africa, one continental government in Africa that is driven by principles and practices of scientific socialism. That's what we believe is the solution that we face all over the world today, and we are committed to carrying out this objective. And this program is hosted each week by myself, Jamu Umi, and my biological and ideological daughter, the newly anointed Dr. Shakura Umi, who's going to facilitate this discussion this week on violence in Africa. So I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you so much, Baba Ajamu. Greetings, everyone. Hello, hello. So we are so glad that you are here with us today, and we are really thankful that you decided to come and join us, especially for today's topic. We know from past, data Baba Ajamu and I have looked at, where we have noted that some of the topics that are rendered to be quote unquote more popular or more attractive or sexy, whatever term you want to use, tend to have some of the higher ratings. But when we talk about, systemic oppression, so whether it's queerness and homophobia or patriarchy, whatever, we tend to have lower numbers. So we are happy that you all are here. We understand that, unfortunately, we live in a system where people receiving respect, regardless of their gender, their class status, their race, these are not commonalities, right? We understand that. And so we're not, at all surprised that it is what it is. But we would encourage each and every one of you to continue to think about how you can still spread the word and how you can still spread this particular topic, because When we don't talk about it, we are contributing to the problem. And for whatever reason that we're choosing not to talk about it, it still contributes to it. When in actuality, the best way that we can go about solving this and reducing this crisis is by talking about it loud and clear, bringing it to the forefront, having these conversations, risking being uncomfortable. Because I just think about all these folks who are no longer with us, whether it was from femicide or whether it was from a different type of genocide, whether they had family members that were murdered, right? Simply because they are the gender that they are. I'm pretty sure it wasn't comfortable for them either, right? So I really want us to think about that. I'm not trying to dismiss feelings. I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that this is a taboo topic. I get that. But just like we don't necessarily want to be uncomfortable, you have to ask yourself, but when do you grow and when do things actually change in this world if we are always remaining comfortable? I really can't even think about a time. And so this is why, like I usually give the example, and Baba Ajamu has said this example too, even when you work out, you're uncomfortable. For some of us, we really like doing burpees, but we might not doing like doing mountain climbers. I personally do not like mountain climbers. I get very uncomfortable when I do mountain climbers, but I do them because I understand that my core needs to be developed. I do them because I understand that I need to develop more discipline. I do them because I understand that before I started doing them, I could not do as many as I can do now. And I certainly could not do them for the amount of time then that I can do now. So the endurance, the duration, all of that contributes, you all. And it's really about mind over matter. So we encourage you, just as if you were challenging yourself in a gym or a workout space, and you're trying to be uncomfortable so that you can develop more muscle. You're trying to be uncomfortable so that you can develop longer respiration and lung capacity, whatever the reason is for why you're working out the way you're working out. I would argue it's the same with this topic. And I would argue, excuse me, each and every one of us has a responsibility towards that. So you might notice that the slide today is very similar to the first slide that we had last week. That's because settler colonialism has a reign in impacting so many different aspects of a colonized person's life, from their physiology, their biology, their mental capacity and mental health, their ability to have a spiritual connection, their ability to have a physical connection, intimate relationships, being able to manage those relationships, communication, how they manage their communication. Colonialism impacts everything. It impacts everything. So it bears repeating that the same slide would be in for this session and topic today because we still need to talk about it. And we still need to acknowledge that it has a great impact on what is happening. I did add some more things at the bottom though, because it's interesting to kind of think about how we can really start to think about how sex trafficking, we can think about femicide, we can think about gender based violence, we could even think about the idea of what it means for us to even tie in to some extent how climate change and gender has a conversation and has a pit in this fight in terms of what we're thinking about. There were some events that took place a couple of years ago from the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It definitely was a topic for Pan African Women's Day, but I believe it was a topic even outside of that. And Baba Jama, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we had two separate events. We had Pan African Women's Day, and then there was another event where we invited some revolutionaries who study and understand climate change, and they were still able to tie it from a gendered standpoint as to why climate change is more likely to impact non-male people and non-male African people more specifically than any other group of people in the whole wide planet. And some of the findings that they indicated were not only profound, but it was really interesting to kind of tie in how even the earth and the climate still has a trajectory on gender and still has a trajectory on how certain genders are still more likely to be discounted, even when it comes to acid rain, even when it comes to hotter summers, even when it comes to trying to understand why the climate is what it is at a certain part of the year. So I think that these are important conversations to have because we have to really start to think about how colonialism has led into the the resistance of matriarchal culture. We have to really think about that. Think about how there was a transition of power with colonialism. We have to think about how we had African values, we had African morals, we had African ways and practices, beliefs, moralities, all these things. And of course, with colonialism, being a system that strips all of that away from the person and the group of people. It takes away their dignity, it takes away their language, their culture, their way of life, their identities. All of that is stripped. Their power, their land, their resources, their food, their circumstances, anything that they once held that connected to their ability to be a powerful dynamic has been completely taken away from them, stolen from them, to the point where the group that is doing the taking is now in a position to call it their own. And so, because of that, they have invaded this new space and they are now controlling the space that has been invaded, the group of people who did the invading, right? And so that means that we can start to think about how matriarchal culture is starting to be devalued, it's starting to be resisted. We can even think about how there's more disorder happening because colonialism is disrupting the way of life, it's disrupting the hierarchies, it's also disrupting the habitats, it's disrupting the ecosystems that we literally have come to understand as a nation, as an African people, right? And we can even think about how we were starting to look at what it meant to practice another way of life because we now understand that these African values are not to be practiced and perpetuated. So we're starting to adopt new ways. We're starting to incorporate other ideologies. We're starting to practice new religions that have nothing to do with us as an African people. And we can see this playing out in other groups as well. For example, our indigenous comrades, I know, were forced with the part of the Indigenous Removal Act and other acts that invaded and traumatized indigenous people. They were forced to go to schools that perpetuated Catholicism, for example. So this idea of how do you resist having a religion being shoved down your throat and you being forced to practice it when that is not the way of your indigenous people and that is not the way of how your ancestors practiced and worshiped, like what all of that looks like, all of the practical implications that come with that. So, we can really start to break down how settler colonialism has really been a contributing factor to that. And to that effect, we can even look at how our values as a people not only have been adapted and been adjusted, but have really started to come into where we don't even know who we are anymore. We don't know who we are because what we're practicing now is not of what we used to be. And it's at this point, it's about us, I guess, just keeping and checking the boxes because it's really not even about survival. If it were about survival, then we would have a better outcome. We wouldn't have as many health issues. We wouldn't have as many economic issues managing jobs and keeping with jobs. We wouldn't have such high unemployment rates. We wouldn't have disrespect that is given to us every single day. We wouldn't be criminalized when we go into the public spaces. We wouldn't be institutionalized. We wouldn't have some of the highest rates when it comes to incarceration if we were valued and respected, and if we did not have to change our values because we would still get respect, is what I'm saying. Okay. But because that is not the case, we know that all of that has contributed one after another like a domino effect to the point where we don't know who we are. So we're just trying to exist, right? Again, survival is not the word because we're not surviving. We're not. We're barely making it, right? And so these are some of the things that we can kind of think about. We can even think about how our African values are collectivist in nature. Our African values are to look out for one another. Our African values are to be considerate and to be altruistic and to be humanist. That is literally who we are as a people, literally. But we now understand that those roles need to shift. So we're starting to see that shift because we understand that you can't necessarily practice humanism under capitalism. You can consider doing it, but there's going to be immense repercussions that come your way because other people are not trained the same way you are. So they're not going to understand why you're so ethical. They're not going to understand why you're so principled. And some of them might be drawn to that and they might want to have a conversation. Those might end up being the same people that you should start an organization with, to be quite honest with you. But the overwhelming majority of the people you interact with are not going to be interested in why you're practicing these ethical and humane opportunities. Instead, they're going to take advantage of that and manipulate you because that's what the system teaches us to do. to take advantage, to, continue to advance up and to get elevated higher than you, to make more money than you, to be better than you because they make more money, to get the promotion and take it away from you so that you don't have an opportunity to advance yourself, to make you feel like you are not enough, to make you feel incompetent on a regular basis. You all know what I'm talking about. Surely I can't be the only one experiencing these things. This is the life that we're living. This is the reality that we are in right now, because that's what capitalism has taught us to do. And because capitalism has taught us to do that, that is, I would say, the definition of survival. How do you continue to be as competitive as you can be? How do you continue to be as selfish as you can be? How can you continue to be as individualistic as you can be so that you can make it all about yourself and make sure that your family is taken care of? No other family is important. No other family matters, but your family needs to remain on top. And if your family is not on top, then you are a failure and you need to do more for your family. How healthy is that lifestyle? How healthy is that mentality? That is not healthy, you all. We wonder why people are dying from heart attacks of stress. Why do we wonder that? It's right there. Why do we wonder that? It is right there. So we have to kind of look more deeply into that, and we have to really start to break down how capitalism, how settler colonialism, these different systemic oppressions, how they have also started to block the unity that we have developed. And I bring this up because later in the presentation, we're going to talk about how, of course, solutions, but we're also going to talk about some organizations at home on the continent that are doing the work to apply these solutions. And I'm going to ask you to think then about what we're talking about now, about how in some cases we have systemic oppression that is blocking the unity that we have always been as a people, us coming together and finding a way to fix these problems ourselves. Capitalism has taught us that that's the wrong way. It's also taught us that it's not our fault that we have to think about other people and their demise. But in actuality, we do, because that's who we are as a people. So I would ask you to go back to that and to think about how is that going to be successful for us as one individual family if this oppression of gender-based violence, if this oppression of femicide, if this oppression of sex trafficking, if this oppression of what it means to have impacts when it comes to genital mutilation, if we as a people, and I don't just mean African people, I mean anybody who understands that genital mutilation impacts every single one of us, whether you have genitals that can be mutilated or not, you come from somebody that has genitals that can be mutilated, which means this is a us problem, you all. This is not a they problem, okay? This is not a them problem. I really hope we're all clear on that, okay? We all have a responsibility to take when it comes to understanding that, which means we all have a responsibility to fight. And you're either a part of the solution or you're a part of the problem. It's very, very simple. You can't have it both ways. So we have to kind of think more about what that really looks like. We have to think about what that means in terms of us coming back to incorporating some unified strategies of solution. Thankfully, we have sibling organizations that are already doing that, thankfully. So it's not like we have to create new options of what that looks like. But I even created a slide where we can talk about new ways, because we have a responsibility to bring something new to the table. We have a responsibility to contribute. Some of us are going to come in and critique. So we definitely have a responsibility to bring something new if we're going to critique. That is just the basic way that we practice our positive criticism, self-criticism in this organization. And one of the things I love best about that particular practice is if you are going to criticize someone, then it is automatically assumed and it is assigned that you then will couple your criticism with a potential solution, so that the criticism is not just going as a quote unquote personal attack, but instead you are saying, my African comrade, I think that this could be done better by you, and here are some ways that I am willing to help support you to do these things better. This is why we always say that being an organizer for this organization has literally made us better individuals, you all. This is why we say that. Because where else in your life are you going to be able to admit that being criticized is probably something that does not feel good, at least under white supremacy and capitalism? No, because you're supposed to be perfect. The system teaches you that you should not make any mistakes. The system teaches you that you should have all your stuff together and you should not have to rely on anyone because it's an individualistic system. So then when you do need help from your family, so then when you do offer to help your family, the people you're offering to help, or you as the individual getting the help, you feel some kind of way. You feel like you haven't succeeded. You feel like you're not where you're supposed to be. Again, I'll be vulnerable and say I definitely feel like that. But I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. And under this system, how could you not feel like that? Because every time you constantly feel like you're actually where you're supposed to be, then there's some other reminder through propaganda that you're still left off, that you're still not quite there, that you're still missing something. Even if you get the best job and even if you have the best relationship and the best family, but you still need a better car. That's why you're going to see the car commercial in just 5 seconds. Even if you get the best car, you still need a better job. That's why you're going to see the Indeed and the LinkedIn commercial, right? You still need a better house. You still need a bigger house. You're a family of three now, but there's one on the way. So you should get a bigger house so you can have more bedrooms for your kids, right? Like all these things, right? And then even when you do all of that, maybe your kid is not going to the best school. You should still be thinking about what's the more expensive option to send your kid to school. I mean, just talking about this, it makes me run out of breath because it's absolutely absurd. But this is the reality. We live this every day. We are constantly trying to keep up, I guess, with ourselves because we don't feel like we're doing enough. And that is capitalism. That is capitalism making us feel like that. That is capitalism making us feel like that. So we have to think more about that. And we have to understand that these rates, whether it's gender based violence, whether it's genital mutilation, sex trafficking, these rates are impacted by systemic oppression, you all. That is a fact. And we need to admit that. We need to admit that and we need to understand that and bring in the connections so that we can really start to understand that. So when Africa loses its way, there are several things that happen. And I'm saying Africa, but of course that means the people obviously who descend from the continent as well. So we can even start to think about how, specifically during the pandemic, some of the data that I located indicated that the pandemic was when those numbers really started to rise, unfortunately, right? And we noted that there were African women and children that were more likely to become victims based on war, migration, and even poverty, right? We can even think about how there are, excuse me, or it was reported that there were increased honor killings, which under my research and investigation, I learned was kind of like a celebratory thing where it was celebrated for you to take lives that didn't necessarily need to be taken. There was some type of, encouragement to do that with certain positions in power who were kind of setting those bars and saying, this is how you can gain my respect if you're able to do these killings, right? Of course, we know that there was an increase of sexual violation, and I hope you understand, adults, what I'm saying when I say that. We can also think about political and sexual assassination. I researched that to kind of understand that those numbers were going up in terms of people who were trying to get into positions of power, or maybe they were already in positions of power. And some of the things that they had to do to get more respect would have been to, disrespect other people and violate them in sexual ways so that they can get ahead, or even to some extent, violating them sexually and then taking their lives, right? Like whatever that looked like for them to do the deed and then to get the reward after that, as disgusting as that is, right? I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. Female genital mutilation went up alarmingly, as well as sex trafficking. And some of the data that I found was really interesting because they did focus on sex trafficking, generally speaking, but they also talked about how there was a higher number, an increase of sex trafficking among queer identifying individuals, which is really something that we need to continue to bring into this conversation. As I talk about patriarchy, as I talk about homophobia, we cannot forget and just make this conversation a heterosexual conversation. We need to make sure to incorporate our queer identifying individuals because unfortunately they are among these numbers. They are contributing to this data and their stories deserve to be told. So these are some really interesting things that we need to be thinking about in terms of how we're looking at this. Speaking of looking, hopefully you have access to the slide, and I'll just point out a couple of things that I found to be interesting. was, obviously within the years 2019 and 2020, there were 53,300 incidents of sexual violence that were reported in Azania, for example. You may recall that Azania is the actual location term, but unfortunately, the colonized term is South Africa. Also, what was interesting was the Azanian police claimed that 146 incidents occurred each day within that same time period. And so, if you're noting the increase of genital mutilation, if you're noting the increase of honor killings, if you're noting the increase of sexual violation, then it goes without saying that there would also be an increase of domestic violence. There would be an increase of forced child marriages as well. So these are the things. And again, like we can see how this is all a trickling effect, you all. We're going to talk in just a moment about the social revolution, but we have talked about it before in the past where we can really start to understand how all of this is breaking down, right? So we got to think more about this. And so this is where we start to introduce some of the solutions that we have noted and that we are continuing to practice in terms of what we've been looking at from the data. Okay. So I think that, when we talk about this taking all of us to really fix this problem, I really do mean all of us. And I think that there's different ways that we can incorporate how we can practice what that looks like. It does acknowledge accountability, and I think accountability for the fact that we may not know as much as we need to know. I think accountability in terms of us admitting that our political education needs to be enhanced. I think accountability in terms of us acknowledging that we may not always want to create or strike up this particular conversation because of the taboo circumstances surrounding it, or maybe just because it's an awkward conversation, or quite frankly, because of patriarchy, where as a toxic cis man, I don't think I need to talk about this. Like, let's just be real. This is an anti-liberal seminar, so let's just be anti-liberal and let's name the names and let's say it, right? Let's be real with it. And so, like, my response to that would be, again, but you come from somebody who is more susceptible to deal with these things. So even if you yourself as a cis man are not in a position to deal with these things, you know people who can be impacted by them. You know people who are impacted by them. Some of your closest friends have probably gone through some things that they don't even feel like they can talk to you about because you've made it clear that you're not a safe person for them. You have made it clear that they cannot trust you. You have made it clear that they don't feel like they can open up to you because they're not sure if you're going to provide a space where they can feel validated. That needs to be a wake up call for you. If you care at all about your friends, if you care at all about the person that you are in this world, you should care about that. And you should care that other people are being violated, even if it has nothing to do with you, because it's the right thing to do as we develop more humanism in this world. It's the right thing to do. So we have to think about accountability on a lot of different levels, you all. And some of that means doing the work for yourself individually, fixing the patriarchal values that you promote, reducing the patriarchal values that you promote. That's an individual thing that you need to work on. But I guarantee you, if you join an organization like we're talking about, then you'll start to be in a space where you can work on that collectively with other people. You'll start to be in a space where you can acknowledge it and you'll start to develop ways that you can address it. I really appreciate how, if you listen to some of Malcolm X's old speeches, he talks about how African women were violated by Klansmen and by, different, European men. And he talks about how some of the brothers would do nothing. He talks about how he personally called them cowards, right? And then he says, if I were there, you would have had to bail me out of jail, and I appreciate Malcolm because even then he was saying we have a responsibility to look after one another. Shame on us for not saying anything about this sooner. Shame on us for not preventing it. Shame on us for not collectively seeing that this is a problem. And I'm speaking specifically to Africans who are in the diaspora because, of course, we're focusing on the continent, but that does not mean that you get to check out. That does not mean that. You should be more checked in, as a matter of fact, because we all have discussed on these seminars for the last 4 years, we've discussed that because 5 years, sorry, we've discussed that for the last 5 years, what happens on the continent matriculates and disseminates out to impact the rest of the African masses. It is unfortunate, but it is true. So just because you're not on the continent doesn't mean you don't need to be aware of the statistics, because that doesn't mean that genital mutilation and femicide and Gender-based violence are not happening in the diaspora. We should not assume that. That would be very ignorant of us to assume that. Okay, so this means that this is a lot closer than you think it is. This is a lot closer than you think it is, which is why this is a we problem, not a they problem and not a them problem, but a we problem, right? And if you identify as a straight heterosexual person, it's a you problem and a me problem that queer identifying individuals are under attack. That is a us problem, you all. Because as I said before, we should just have be fed up with the fact that people are under attack, period. It shouldn't matter whether or not they're straight, whether or not they're bi. That shouldn't matter. None of that should matter. The underlining threat is a threat to injustice. A threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And the bottom line is, if queer identifying individuals are under attack, you better bet your dollar that other marginalized genders are going to be under attack soon. And you also better bet your dollar that marginalized people and colonized people are under attack. It's all connected. Differently able people are under attack. It's all connected, right? So this is where we can start to kind of break that down, and we can think about how we need to protect ourselves. I don't just mean physically, though, ideologically as well. We need to protect ourselves. We always say that you need to join an organization that's working for justice. If you have access to look at the slide right now, count the number of organizations that you see listed. All of these organizations are literally doing the work to resist and to fight back against genital mutilation, you all. They are doing the work to resist and to fight back against femicide. They are doing the work to resist and to fight back against gender-based violence. They are literally doing the work, you all. They have made statements on their websites. They have created articles. They have published things on their website. They have organized events around these topics. They have had panelists speaking at these events around these topics. I mean, we can't ask for them to do anything else. It's on us now, you all. It's on us. They have literally been doing the work, but they need help. They need help. And we should be stepping in and doing what we can on our side so that we can continue the fight. It should not just be on them, it should be on all of us, because this is a us problem. We can also think about how I mentioned protecting ourselves ideologically, which is why I'm continuing to say we should examine the number of organizations that have already taken a charge. But also, this is why we say that you should join an organization that is working for justice. This is why we say that, because you can literally do work like this where you are resisting oppressive structures. Literally, you can do work like that. If you're in a organization that is promoting humanism and ethical values, yes, you can do that. We also encourage you to think about what it means to develop protection from a physical standpoint, not just ideological. And Baba Jamu and I were talking about this just a month ago, I think, where this whole time I've been trying to develop my physical form because I want to, have a more quality of life. I don't want to have aches and pains. I don't want to, be aging faster than I need to, whatever. And he said, yeah, all of that is good, but I work out because I'm trying to make sure that if something happens and I need to protect someone, I'm in a position where I am physically fit to do so. And that never crossed my mind, but I thought about it and I said, you know what? That is a valid reason. And I think I will use that to motivate me to continue to push myself, to continue to build my core, to continue to build my heart rate up, to continue to have more tolerance for what it means taking the stairs, even if it's more flights than I anticipated, whatever that looks like. You know what I'm saying? So these are the things I think, you all, we need to develop protection for our people, for our families, for ourselves, ideologically protecting ourselves by enhancing our political education and joining an organization that is working for justice. But we also need to protect ourselves physically, which means we need to do the work so that we can physically be in a position where we can do what needs to be done, especially if something goes down and we need to take a fight. We need to take a stand on something, right? We also need to think about how we can use our skills to help advance the struggle. So we can think about what it means to use our writing skills if we consider ourselves good writers. We talk all the time about hood communists being a really good platform for writers if you want to write something and publish it. We will continue to encourage you to consider doing that. Will it continue to encourage you to consider doing that? But also, maybe you can help organize events. And maybe if writing is not your thing, maybe you can facilitate an event on femicide. or genital mutilation, right? Maybe you can organize an event where you can think about what it means to break those definitions down. Because maybe the first step is making sure everybody knows what those actually mean, right? Being able to talk about how femicide is the definition of a person, usually someone who identifies as a woman, being being taken from this earth or murdered just because of their gender. And as I said, it's connected to the honor killings, right? How we know that certain genders don't have as much value. So that's why there's more quote unquote honor in them being killed, because they're not as valuable, right? And so just kind of breaking those down, helping people to understand that genital mutilation is the act of violating someone by affecting them physiologically and really scarring them, pun intended, with by taking away some of their physical essence of what makes them who they are, especially as it relates to their genitals. Like breaking those conversations down. You know what I mean? Really helping people to understand what that looks like. And like I said, if you're not willing to publish, then maybe you're willing to facilitate or MC even. Maybe you can MC an event where they're talking about genital mutilation. Maybe you can't MC, but maybe you can organize in create excuse me, you can organize a panel by inviting panelists to come and speak. So maybe you can't MC the whole thing, but you can organize the panel portion of that event and get the panelists in contact with the MC so they can still show up and give their piece, and you can create some panelist questions, right? These are not difficult things, you all. They might seem really intimidating or difficult right now because maybe you don't have the experience, but that's where we come in and we can help you with that. I actually really enjoy being a facilitator. I really enjoy being an MC, and I really enjoy facilitating panels and creating the questions. It's actually a lot of fun, and you get to meet new people from different organizations that are doing the work, and it allows you to connect with them. It's a really cool opportunity for you to learn from other folks, and it's a great opportunity for you to come out of your comfort zone. I don't enjoy public speaking, but I enjoy it more now than I did before because I do it more and I'm putting myself out there. So I'm less nervous and I can have a little bit more fun with it, right? So that's how we kind of think about that and kind of break that down a little bit. I also will say it's really important for the event to have support in all avenues. So maybe you're not good at emceeing, maybe you're not good at facilitating, maybe you're not good at organizing panels, but you're really good at managing the tech. Okay, so all the videos, all the music, all the this, all the PowerPoints that people need to show during this event, maybe you can be the organizer to manage all of that. If you're not good at managing the tech, then maybe we need you to help us when it comes to the hospitality part, because we need to have events that have food. We need to have the food set out. We need to make sure that people are able to get plates for the children, right? So I'm saying, like, there are too many different jobs that we would need your help with, you all. Registration. That's one of the most important. When people first walk in, we need somebody who is sitting at the table to be a smiling face for them and to encourage them to sign up so that we can get their contact information. There are plenty of things that you can do to help advance this topic and to get more word out about it. Things you can do virtually and things you can do in person. So yes, there is opportunities for everyone. Okay. I also have here that we can even think about what it means to talk about creating a reading circle. Maybe you're not ready to join an organization that's working for justice, but maybe what you can do is find an article from Hid Communist that is talking about femicide or gender-based violence or genital mutilation or all of them, and you can assign it to two of your closest friends. And the three of you can come and discuss the article, talk about what it means, talk about what it means for the advancement of African people, whatever that looks like. Create some discussion questions, and maybe that can build into a work study circle, right? Excuse me. We can even think about how we always say to support Pan-Africanist organizations, because these organizations are doing the work and it's expensive, you all. A lot of them have been punished because they're doing the work, to the point where their offices have been raided. We've had party members who have been murdered. There's different ways that these imperialist organizations and governments are fighting back and trying to slow us down. So by you helping us, by supporting them, they are in a position where they can do the work a little bit more, because we might have resources in the diaspora that may not come as easily to them on the continent, right? And we even have to think about how if you were to do an organized talk, let's say you're doing a talk at your job and you all are just going to talk for 45 minutes about genital mutilation or gender based violence or whatever, femicide, at your talk, there might be some contradictions as to why you're doing this talk. Maybe you have a month where you dedicate it to a particular theme or something every month, and it's an opportunity for people to enhance their political education. Well, you can do this talk at your job and just say it addresses DEI, because it very much does. We're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what we're talking about, right? So this is how you're in a position to do that. Like, you need to talk about this, and it needs to cover the DEI boundaries, and it does. It does. It very much does. Like, what does that look like? And then you're enhancing people's information. You're getting more information out, and you're allowing people to think about something bigger than themselves. That is a big one right there, because our society has constantly taught us that we are enough, when in actuality, no, we are not enough. And there are other people who are in this world impacted by things, and we need to be mindful of that. We need to continue to think about that. We cannot forget that this is bigger than us. I'll also say, some of us are developing more of our comfort behind the camera, but in front of the microphone. So maybe it's time that you all consider starting a podcast, really a Pan Africanist podcast that focuses on topics that are impacting Mother Africa. That would be really cool if you could build up enough followers, or maybe even invite the followers that you already have. If you're on social, then that's all you have to do is invite them and pick a topic and start talking about it. Maybe the first one could be gender based violence, since we can talk about that and understand how it leads into femicide, how it leads into genital mutilation, how it leads into forced child marriages, whatever that looks like. But we all have a responsibility to do this. And however you choose to do it, you are expected to do it. The people are counting on you. Don't let them down. Okay, I want to pay homage to a couple of different ways that this particular organization, surely you saw this massive list on the previous slide. I'll just give these organizations a quick shout out. So we have the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola. We have the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, the PAIGC. And the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola is MPLA. We have the Tanzanian African National Union, the TANU. We have the Democratic Party of Guinea, the PDG, the Mozambique Liberation Front, or FRELIMO. We have the Pan African Congress of Azania, and we have the African National Congress. So this is either the PAC or the ANC. And then we also have the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, and all of these organizations are fighting against the border wars for a better social revolution. We have talked about social revolution before in this talk, but I do want to encourage you to just continue to think about what that means. And of course, we can even think about, our book, Stephanie Erdang's book, Fighting to Colonialism, what it means for our folks who are experiencing more than one oppression, and how they are trying to navigate through this world when they have extra things that are against them compared to the rest of us that don't have as much. So I would say, for example, if you identify as a non-male person, then obviously patriarchy and sexism are niches and counts against you in terms of you being oppressed, right? But if you identify as, and of course, if you're a non male person of color, then white supremacy and racism too, yes. But if you are a non male person of color, then you do have to navigate white supremacy, racism, patriarchy, and sexism. But if you are a straight non male person of color, you don't have to navigate homophobia. And we just need to acknowledge that, you all. We need to acknowledge that, because that's part of this conversation, is where we understand where our oppressions, where they kind of end, but that also means that somebody still might have it worse, right? So because of that, we should be coming together and finding a way to address everything that is harming and toxifying our societies, and also making it difficult for people to not be oppressed because they continue to experience so much institutionalized oppression. Also, as we said before, and we'll say again, if anybody is still experiencing oppression, then that means that we're all in danger. So we need to continue to think about how we can address that. So on that note, I want to highlight this particular organization, the African National um, National Congress website, because this is one example, you all. Of course, we just listed all those organizations before that are literally doing this work, but the African National Congress literally has this on their website. This is why I provided the screenshot, where you can literally see they have a section that is focused all about reporting abuse. And I want to give a shout out to the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, which is a component of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The All African Women's Revolutionary Union also has a very big job in terms of navigating abuse, navigating disrespect, navigating patriarchal behaviors and tactics that people are displaying, so that they can try to help synthesize, understand, resist, and address within our organization. And I know that that work that the union is doing is not easy, but some of us have to do it because we understand it's the only way, again, to address those fighting those two colonialisms that Stephanie Erdang has talked about, right? So I would give so much honor and praise to the African National Congress, because they too are trying to do this work. And if, again, if you can see the slide, it's not like they're generally speaking, like they are very clearly providing a Skype address. And I believe the handler name is Help Me GBV, which stands for gender based violence. So again, like just calling it and naming it, you all, this is what that looks like. Calling it and naming it. The African National Congress organization also has this initiative called the 16 Days of Activism, where they try to promote that no violence is done to women and or children. And it is a global campaign, but the African National Congress made me aware of it. So this is where I learned about it, where it runs from November 25th to December 10th. And the objective and goal, like we said, is to reduce the amount of violence that is done to women and children, right? The African National Congress is also responsible for the 54th National Conference, where they do a call for the abolition of all forms of violence and the oppression of women. And they usually will develop this curriculum around this conference because they're making a call to end patriarchal systems that continue to justify the exploitation, silencing, and abuse of women and children. This is what taking a stand looks like, you all. This right here, what the ANC is doing, that is what that looks like. Okay, these folks are being anti-liberal. Okay, they are not holding back their feelings, they are not keeping their thoughts to themselves. They are being very honest about where we are and where we need to go and how we are going to get there. And I would argue, if you consider yourself an ally, if you consider yourself a part of the solution, not the problem, then that means that you're not perpetuating liberalism. That's what that means. That means that you are practicing what it means to be honest. You are calling people out. You are holding people accountable. We can't do that and still get to where we need to get as an organized front if we're not going to be honest about how we need to get there. And if you know that a comrade needs to work on something, or if you know that you need to work on something, then you need to be honest about what that is. This again comes back to the positive criticism, self-criticism. We don't criticize one another in the party because we have nothing better to do and we want to harm people and make them feel bad about themselves. No, we criticize people because any faults that we have as a unified front is impacting the organization's ability to better itself, which means it is impacting the ability to better the African people. Do not forget that. So that means that we need to get our stuff together so that we can help African people get their stuff together. That's what that means. That is what that means. So we need to take a stand and understand that. We need to understand that if we stand for nothing, we'll fall for anything. We need to understand that. And part of that is being anti liberal. That's what part of that looks like. You know what I mean? Being able to use the ANC as an example, because we should be proud to see that they have that on their website. But we should be putting that on our social media pages. We should be putting something like that on our websites. We should create an organization where people can reach out if they need to report gender-based violence. That's another thing we could be doing. For those of us that want to do a thing, we want to contribute to, community service or whatever, that's what that can look like for us. That is exactly what that can look like for us. So there are so many different ways that we can all take responsibility for what this looks like. We can have conversations, we can develop curriculum, we can teach classes. I didn't even get to all of that, but I think the sky is the limit. The point is take responsibility and contribute. Do your part so that this information can get out to the people. Because a lot of people may not be talking about it, and it especially may not be an attractive topic to talk about. But that doesn't mean that it deserves any less of our attention. We have a responsibility to make this world better, you all. And the best way to do that is to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable. Because when we are uncomfortable, that is when we grow. All right, Baba Jamu, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Shakura. Asante Sana, Midasi, Obrigada. Thank you very much. Very important information that you have shared. And so I just want to take this time to let you all know that you should come back next week, tell some people. We're going to be talking, we're challenging the myth of a Christian massacre in Nigeria. This has been something that's been propagated by these reactionary fascists in this country and in all of these capitalist countries that Nigeria is slaughtering Christian people. And so what we're going to the entire program next Sunday is going to be about eradicating that lie that's being told and giving you information about what's actually happening in Nigeria today and why it's happening. So join us next week for that presentation. Very important. And then I'll just give a plug since we have a little more time. The week after that, we're going to be talking about the 23rd. We're going to be talking about healthy alternatives to celebrating these so-called holidays. This is something that we deal with every year around this time. People get depressed. They don't have money. They don't have people to engage with. And as a result of that, since everything in this backward profit over people capitalist society is about what you have, not about what kind of person you are, not about what kind of level of uh, character you have. None of that matters. The only thing matters here is what you have. And nothing, the only thing that matters is the form, not the essence, how things look, not what they contain. That's the kind of backward society that we live in here. So it really drains people around this time of year. So what we want to do is have a program on the 23rd where we're talking about healthy alternatives to just sitting up on these holidays and just feeling like somehow your life is not adequate. They love to do that, is to make everybody feel inadequate because you're not who they are. You're not doing what they're doing. And by they, I'm talking about the people who symbolize this backward capitalist system. You're not a billionaire. You can't get somebody to be interested in you sexually every 5 seconds or so of your life. You can't go in a restaurant and spend $5,000. They want to make you think that that's makes it so that you're less of a person than them. You've struggled with alcohol, you've struggled with drugs, you've struggled with whatever, that you're somehow less than them. And the thing about that that's so interesting is that these people, these billionaires, these celebrities are the lowest scum on the planet Earth. They don't have any values, they don't have any morality. Their whole position in life is based solely on what serves their interests. So if it serves their interests this week, then that's what they're for. If something diametrically opposed to whatever the hell they were talking about this week comes up next week, then that all of a sudden is what they're for. And you see it all the time with these people. Look at someone like Donald Trump, for example. This person uh, is being held up by millions of people right now as being the model of morality, the model of faith. And this is a dude that he's been to all the parties, manipulated, exploited women, uh, engaged in pedophilia, more than likely, against underage persons. Um, went to all the Epstein parties, all the Diddy parties, all the went probably the devil probably had a party, and that low life cracker probably went to that party. So these are the people that are telling you that you're somehow deficient because of whatever shortcomings have happened in your life. And what we're trying to say is that you can't listen to these goddamn people. You have to understand what your mission is in life and move forward in that direction and march at your own pace. You're not competing against anybody else. You're not trying to match yourself against anybody else. You're taking one step at a time. Stop listening to these. I don't know why y'all listen to these. I saw last week there, well, 50 Cent said that Mangami being elected in New York was the end of New York. Now, I'm not for 50 Cent. I'm not for Mangami. But I know one thing. How the hell would I listen to 50 Cent tell me about any goddamn thing on the planet Earth? What the hell does he know about anything to tell me anything? Now, if I wanted to know something about how to put together a rap record, that is the lone instance where I would contact or listen to a clown like that. Other than that, I'm not trying to make a rap album. So he serves absolutely zero purpose as far as I'm concerned with anything I'm trying to do in my life. He's not contacting me to ask how to build a social movement. So why the hell would I listen to what he has to say? He wouldn't contact me rather to ask me how to rap on a record. I mean, he'd look like a damn fool if he did that. So I would look like a damn fool listening to him talk about social activism. What the hell does he know about that? He hasn't spent 5 seconds in any organization fighting for forward progress for humanity. Not even 5 seconds. So this is what we're saying. So next week, the myth of the Christian massacre in Nigeria, and then the week after that, healthy alternatives to these backward ass so-called holidays. And we also just want to invite you the red and white QR code in the upper left. If you scan that with your smartphone, listen to that. Like if your phone is smart, what are they saying about you? You're using it, you're relying on it. The phone is smart and you're relying on it. What the hell kind of statement does that make about you? Y'all got to think about this kind of stuff. That's why, like I tell my wife every day, I don't want to ask Alexa a damn thing. I'll use my brain and look it up myself. Okay, I don't want to be intellectually lazy like that because I know what these people are trying to do. They're trying to make us all move like sheep and not have a clue what the hell's going on here. And then as soon as the electricity goes out and the internet goes out, a whole lot of us are going to be absolutely worthless. We won't know how to figure out how to spit. That's what they're trying to do. It ain't going to happen with all of us. Some of us are getting prepared for that. So click on, scan that red and white QR code. It'll tell you about all the APRP programs that happen online, so you can check them out, including this one. There are a number of other ones. And then you can also go to the Forward Ever shop. Many of y'all are going to be participating in these holidays. So if you're going to do it, at least buy presents that support the forward movement of social movements. Why, don't just spend your money at Target and Walmart that supports nothing except making the evil bastards that run those entities richer. Go to Forward Ever Shop by scanning this QR code and buy some clothes that help us do the work that we do on the ground in Africa. And you get t-shirts, hoodies, other clothes that have positive, reaffirming messages. You can give them as gifts, you can wear them yourself, whatever fits your fancy. But you should definitely do that. I mean, support this necessary work that's taking place. And as Shakur mentioned, hoodcommunist.org, you can get information about that blog through that QR code up there. And you should write. You should look at the guidelines and try to write something and submit it. I write constantly. We need more people doing that. I don't know what the hell people are waiting on. Just go ahead and try it. And if you want us to look at what you wrote, we're happy to do that. We are trying to create more people who are focused on making change. And for those of you in the Sacramento area, we have community self-defense every Thursday. Exercise your mind, exercise your body, get prepared on all levels. Stop talking about getting prepared and get prepared. Stop talking about it. That's why I just be honest. Like I don't even listen to people when they keep talking about what they're gonna do. I don't do that. If I tell you I'm doing something, it's done. And I don't understand that. Like, just do it. No one, you can't mess up what's already. If you ain't doing a damn thing, you can't mess anything up. All you can do is come up. So get prepared, you all. Just tell yourself this week I'm gonna do this and do it. Even if you don't do it perfectly, just do it. That's all. So Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. here in Sacramento, 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese. 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. If you don't live in this area, then tell some people because some of you aren't going to do anything if somebody puts a gun to your head. But at least when they put the gun to your head, you can say, well, before you shoot me, let me tell you about some community self-defense. So maybe you, after you kill me, you can tell somebody since I'm not going to do anything. So do that, please. At least do that much. Make that happen. And then the QR, and then join the All African People's Revolutionary Party if you're qualified to do so. And you can go to aaprp-intl.org and you can get information about how to join and tell people about that. I mean, nobody's racist. Nobody ever admits they're racist, but you don't know a single African you can direct to an African organization. Then guess what? You're racist. That's what that means. You don't know anybody, that's what that means. I got people I know from all communities because I'm out here doing this work. How the hell can you say you care about something you don't even know anybody that's impacted by it? Like y'all, some of y'all just strange as hell. I'm sorry. It's just no other way to put it, right? And I have no responsibility to play along with that strange ass shit. Like, let's get our thing together. All right. So, also, Burkina Books, the QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one. Click on that. Support the comrades' work on the ground in Africa, Burkina Faso, and Niger. We definitely want to do that. And buy the book, A Guide for Organized Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against Patriarchal, White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Unfortunately, it's only available on Amazon. It's only $8. 100% of the proceeds go towards anti-fascist work that I'm engaged in. I just bought pads for folks to practice blocking in the community defense classes I just mentioned. That comes out of my pocket. So everybody that buys a book, I use those proceeds to support the work. And so buy the book. If you bought it, tell somebody else. Get people to form a book club. Call libraries and ask them to order. You don't have to pay anything to do that. So just do that and support